When an avoidant disappears, the first instinct most people have is to take it personally. We tell ourselves, they left, so it must be over. We treat their silence like a verdict, as if their absence is proof of our inadequacy or a sign that the connection never truly mattered. But here's the truth most people never understand. When an avoidant walks away, it's not closure. It's a cycle. And if you don't understand that cycle, you'll mistake their retreat for rejection, when in reality, it's fear masquerading as indifference. Avoidant attachment isn't about the absence of emotion. It's about the fear of being consumed by it. People with this pattern don't detach because they feel nothing. They detach because they feel too much and don't know how to regulate it. Closeness ignites their nervous system like a fire alarm, and their instinct is to run from what they actually want most. Imagine standing in front of something beautiful that terrifies you because you don't know how to hold it without breaking it. That's how the avoidant experiences love. So when they pull away, it's not because the bond lacked meaning. It's because it had too much meaning. This is why silence from an avoidant is never the same as closure. Closure is final, it's clean, it's intentional, but their silence is chaotic, impulsive, driven by fear, not certainty. It's like a pressure valve blowing open when they feel emotionally flooded, and once that pressure calms, once they're back in their controlled emotional zone, they don't feel down. They just feel safe again. And from that place of safety, they start thinking. They start remembering. They start circling back mentally to what they ran from. Their nervous system interprets the absence as relief, but their heart interprets it as loss. That tension pulls them back toward what they left behind. But here's where most people sabotage themselves. They treat the avoidance retreat like a judgment, and they react emotionally, chasing, pleading, demanding clarity. And that reaction confirms the avoidance fear that closeness is unsafe. It keeps the cycle spinning because now they associate you with emotional intensity rather than emotional safety. The paradox is that the less you react to their absence, the faster they start to miss you. Because the truth is, avoidants don't process love in real time. They process it in hindsight. They understand what you meant only when you're gone. They can't see your value in the heat of closeness, but they can feel it like an ache when the connection is quiet. And this is why you must never interpret their disappearance as the end of the story. It's not an ending, it's an emotional reset. When they go silent, they're not deleting you from their mind. They're trying to delete the intensity they felt because it overwhelmed their capacity to stay regulated. It's their nervous system slamming the brakes. But once their system calms down, their mind reopens the file. They start scanning the memories they buried, and what they see isn't your flaws or the conflicts you had. They see how safe they felt when they weren't scared. They remember your calm, your patience, your presence. That's what draws them back, not because they planned it, but because their emotional cycle always brings them back to what once felt like home. You have to understand this. Their retreat was never about your worth, and their silence was never a statement about the value of the relationship. It was a statement about their fear of losing control. So if you can reframe their disappearance as part of their internal war, not as evidence of your inadequacy, you take your power back. You stop waiting for closure they're incapable of giving, and you start living as if their return is inevitable, not because you need it, but because human behavior makes it predictable. Because this is what most people miss. Avoidants are not immune to attachment. They are ruled by it. They just fear it so deeply they pretend they don't need it. But that need always wins. And when it does, they come back, not because they chose to, but because their psychology leaves them no other option. They will circle back again and again until they either face their fear or lose you completely. That's the cycle. And knowing that cycle is how you stop being emotionally hijacked by their disappearances. So the next time an avoidant vanishes, don't make it mean. you've been abandoned. Make it mean they're resetting their nervous system. Make it mean they're in the stage of the cycle where they run from the fire they secretly wish they could hold. And while they're doing that, you hold your ground. Because the moment you stop chasing, you flip the dynamic. They're no longer running away from pressure. They're running back to peace. And peace is what you become when you stop taking their absence personally. Remember this, their silence is not your ending. It's just the pause before their return. When someone with an avoidant attachment style pulls away, most people assume distance erases feelings. We've been conditioned to believe that absence makes people forget. That time apart dulls emotion. That emotional connection requires constant proximity to survive. But with an avoidant, the opposite is true. Distance is not the death of their feelings. It's the magnifier of them. The further they get from you physically or emotionally, the more clearly they can see what you meant to them. This is because avoidants are not emotionally numb, they are emotionally flooded. Closeness to them is like standing in the center of a hurricane. It's not calm, it's chaos. Their nervous system interprets intimacy as danger, and when emotions rise too high, they instinctively shut down to preserve control. It's not that they don't feel, it's that they feel too much all at once. And in that emotional flood, they lose perspective. They can't separate your love from their fear, your presence from their panic. So they run. But here's the paradox. Once they've run far enough, something fascinating happens. Their nervous system starts to calm. The chaos fades. And when that happens, all the fear that distorted their perception begins to clear. Suddenly, they can see what they couldn't see before. How deeply they were actually attached to you. The same presence that felt suffocating up close starts to feel comforting from afar. The very bond they rejected begins to pull at them in silence. It's almost like staring at the sun, too close, and they can't see it without pain. Step back, and its beauty becomes undeniable. Distance gives the avoidant enough emotional space to feel safe again, and only from that safety can they allow themselves to miss you. This is why their minds start circling back the moment you disappear from their day-to-day life. They're not remembering conflict. They're remembering calm. They're not replaying arguments. They're replaying your steadiness. And here's the part people don't want to accept. Your absence becomes their emotional proof of your value. The longer they sit with the silence, the more their mind fills it with you. Because the human brain doesn't tolerate voids, it fills them. And avoidants, more than anyone, romanticize what they can no longer touch. The relationship becomes safer in their memory than it ever felt in reality. They sanitize it, polish it, replay the highlights, and that longing quietly grows until it becomes unbearable. This is why I say, never confuse their silence with indifference. Avoidants don't process love in the moment. They process it in the aftermath. They need distance to hear their own heartbeat. They need your absence to recognize your presence. And this is where your power is found. If you chase them while they're running, you interrupt this process. You keep them in the storm, where fear drowns everything. But if you stay still, if you go silent, if you let them drift, you give their nervous system the very thing it's starving for, calm. And once they have calm, they start to miss the person who gave it to them. Think about this. The absence they created becomes the bridge that brings them back. Because while their fear tells them closeness is danger, their longing tells them you were safety. And longing always wins over fear. Just not immediately. It wins slowly, quietly, inevitably. So while they are trying to forget you, they are really building the emotional momentum that will pull them back. The more they try to push you out of their mind, the more space they carve out for you in it. This is the pattern. They run to find relief. They find relief, and it feels like emptiness. And in that emptiness, they start hearing echoes of you. Not your words, your essence. The way you made them feel when they weren't afraid. And once they start hearing those echoes, their return is no longer a choice. It's an emotional inevitability. So don't panic when they retreat. Don't take the distance as a verdict. Take it as the beginning of the pull, because every mile they put between you only sharpens the image of you in their mind. Your absence doesn't erase you. It etches you deeper. And that's the paradox you must master if you want to hold your power with an avoidant. You don't become unforgettable by holding on tighter. You become unforgettable by letting go and letting distance do the work that closeness never could. Remember, this distance is not their way of discarding you. It's their way of discovering you. One of the most misunderstood truths about avoidant individuals is this: they always return to what feels safe. That's their compass. They don't move toward passion, intensity, or even love, not directly. They move toward whatever makes their nervous system feel calm, contained, predictable. And that's the secret most people miss. When they get caught in the emotional chaos of an avoidance withdrawal, we think they left because they stopped caring. We assume their return depends on how much they love us. But love is not what governs the avoidance behavior. Safety is. When an avoidant pulls away, they are running from vulnerability. Vulnerability to them feels like danger. Their nervous system treats emotional closeness like standing at the edge of a cliff. The sensations are overwhelming. Their instinct says, get away before you fall. So they distance themselves not as a calculated punishment, but as a reflexive survival mechanism. And in that distance, they are searching, not for someone new, not for something better, but for the feeling of being emotionally unthreatened again. They are trying to get back to equilibrium. Here's where most people lose their power. They respond to that distance with pursuit, with pleading, emotional pressure, and demands for answers. But this confirms the very belief the avoidant is running from, that love equals engulfment. It reinforces the story that closeness is suffocating, that connection means losing control. And so they retreat even further. It becomes a push-pull dance that only deepens their fear. But something transformative happens when you choose not to chase. When you stand still, grounded, emotionally neutral, you break the pattern. Your calm presence becomes the one fixed point in their storm. And over time, their nervous system associates you, not chaos, not threat, with safety. This is what magnetizes them back. It's not words, it's not persuasion, it's not proving your worth. It's your emotional stillness that becomes their lighthouse. Think about this. An avoidant does not return to the person who chased them. They return to the person who didn't collapse without them. That stillness is power. It shows them you are not another source of chaos. It proves you can hold emotional space without demanding from them, without flooding them. And to someone wired to fear engulfment, that is irresistible. It disarms their defenses because it contradicts their deepest expectation, that love means losing themselves. And this is where people often misunderstand the nature of attraction with avoidance. They think they need to become louder to be heard, more emotionally expressive to break through the wall. But the truth is, it's the quiet that pierces their armor. It's your lack of reaction that rewires the association in their mind. Instead of linking you with pressure, they link you with peace. And peace is what their entire nervous system is starving for. Over time, that sense of safety becomes more compelling than their fear, because even avoidants, especially avoidants, are searching for home. Not a physical place, but an emotional one. They want to be held without feeling trapped. They want to be known without feeling consumed. And when they experience that with you, even briefly, they don't forget it. They orbit it. They leave, yes, but they keep looking back, checking if it's still there, wondering if they can return without losing themselves. This is why I say they will always return to what feels safe eventually. Because safety is the foundation every human mind seeks before it can allow love to grow. And for an avoidant, that search is desperate. Even if it's hidden behind pride, they can try to outrun their longing, but they can't outgrow their need for safety. When they find someone who embodies it, that person becomes gravity. They might drift far, but gravity always wins. And this is the paradox you must master. Your power is not in proving, persuading, or chasing. Your power is in becoming immovable. When you stand still in your worth, detached from their cycles, you become the very thing their entire nervous system craves. And they will come back, not because you pulled them, but because they could finally exhale around you. So remember this, they don't return to intensity. They return to safety. Become that, and watch how even the ones who swore they'd never come back eventually do. One of the most paradoxical dynamics in an avoidant relationship is this: the moment you stop feeding their need for emotional control, something inside them begins to panic. Avoidants spend so much of their time trying to protect themselves from being consumed by closeness that they don't realize they've built their identity around being wanted from a distance. They fear being engulfed, yes, but they also fear being forgotten. And when you go silent, when you pull your energy away completely, that second fear, being erased, starts screaming louder than the first. This is why your detachment is far more powerful than your presence. As long as you are trying to prove your worth, trying to convince them to stay, they can keep pretending they don't care. They can tell themselves a story that they are in control, that they chose the distance, that you are still there if they ever want to come back. It's safe for them to run because they believe the door will stay open. But the second you stop chasing, the second you go emotionally quiet, that illusion collapses. And when it does, it hits their nervous system like a shockwave. Avoidants are wired to associate love with danger, but they are also wired as human beings to crave significance. Every human mind carries a primal need to feel like they matter to someone. When you disappear from their emotional landscape, you don't just remove your presence. You remove their proof that they mattered. That's what starts to gnaw at them in the silence. They don't interpret your absence as peace. They interpret it as erasure. They start wondering if they were just another face to you, if their disappearance didn't leave a dent at all. That's the psychological twist no one expects. Avoidants often act like they don't care, like they're indifferent, but their entire defense system depends on believing they left an emotional mark. When that belief gets threatened, when you show no reaction, no pursuit, no emotional leakage, they spiral. Because if you can live without them, it means they weren't as unforgettable as they told themselves. And that is intolerable to their ego. It destabilizes the identity they built on the illusion of control. So what happens? That fear of being forgotten starts mutating into obsession. It's subtle at first. Little memories surfacing, flashes of old conversations, fragments of your laughter. But the more they try to push it away, the stronger it becomes. Because here's the truth: the human brain doesn't let go of unfinished emotional business. It loops it. It replays it until it finds closure. And avoidants never get closure when they run. They get relief. Relief is temporary, it's not resolution. And in the vacuum left behind, their mind starts obsessively reaching for what it can't have anymore: you. This is why your silence is so powerful. It creates contrast. When you were there, they could dismiss you as ordinary. When you vanish, you become rare. Scarcity amplifies value in the human mind. What is abundant is ignored, what is scarce becomes sacred. And suddenly, you are scarce. They can't access you. They can't predict you. They don't know if you still think about them at all. That mystery becomes a psychological hook. It's not even about love at first. It's about control. They want to prove they still matter. They want to see if they can still get a reaction. But something deeper happens in that pursuit. They start to remember why they wanted you in the first place. What began as ego-driven curiosity turns back into emotional longing. They realize the peace they felt with you, the stability they ran from, the connection they were too afraid to hold. And this time, that longing is supercharged by the fear that they've truly lost you. That fear cuts through their avoidant defenses like nothing else can. That is the power of your detachment. It flips the entire emotional equation. As long as you are trying to hold on, They feel free to run, but the moment you let go, they feel the full weight of what they lost. And it is that weight, not your words, not your pleas, not your logic, that pulls them back. So remember this, the most magnetic thing you can do is stop trying to be magnetic. Stop trying to convince someone to care. Because when you detach, you activate the deepest fear in the avoidant mind, the fear of being forgotten. And that fear becomes the invisible thread that pulls them back toward you. Your silence becomes gravity. There's a psychological twist most people never see coming when it comes to avoidance. They don't just drift back because of longing. They drift back because they've rewritten the past to make it emotionally safe for them to return. This is one of the most fascinating and frustrating aspects of the avoidant mind. They don't process the truth of the relationship as it was. They reconstruct it in a way that protects their ego from shame, from vulnerability, from the raw admission that they pushed away someone they deeply needed. Understand this, when an avoidant leaves, they do it in a surge of emotional self-protection. Their nervous system is screaming for space, for control, for escape from perceived engulfment. They exit with conviction, telling themselves it's the right choice, that you were too much, that the connection was too intense. But time has a strange effect on the avoidant psyche. The emotions fade, and what's left isn't clarity, it's discomfort. Not because they suddenly feel ready for closeness, but because the human mind cannot live peacefully with unfinished stories. The lack of resolution becomes a splinter in their memory. To pull that splinter out, they begin rewriting the narrative. Slowly, quietly, they sand down the edges of what happened. The arguments become smaller in their memory. The emotional chaos becomes muted, and your stability, your warmth, your presence starts to glow brighter against the dimness of their solitude. They tell themselves you weren't that intense, that they overreacted, that you probably understood them better than they gave you credit for. This revision isn't about you. It's about self-preservation. It allows them to come back without confronting the guilt of having abandoned someone who loved them. This is crucial to understand. Avoidants are not great at processing shame. Shame feels annihilating to them, like proof that they are unworthy of love. So instead of admitting, I hurt someone who mattered, they rewrite the script so they can say, maybe it wasn't so bad. Maybe they're okay. Maybe I'm okay. That psychological loophole is how they grant themselves permission to return. It's how they lower their own defenses enough to reapproach you without drowning in self-condemnation. And this is why you'll often see them resurface as if nothing happened. They don't want to talk about the past, not because it didn't matter, but because they've edited the past in their mind to make it survivable. They will try to reconnect lightly, casually, like slipping back into an old routine. This confuses people. How can they act so normal after disappearing? But it makes perfect sense when you understand what's happening beneath the surface. They've convinced themselves they didn't really do damage. It's how they shield their ego while still answering the pull of their longing. Now here's the deeper truth you need to grasp. This rewriting is not malicious. It's not manipulation in the traditional sense. It's a trauma response. It's how the avoidant mind protects itself from emotional collapse. They don't consciously sit down and decide to distort the past. It happens automatically as their nervous system tries to regulate. The story changes because the pain of the original story is too threatening to hold. But here's the paradox: while they are busy rewriting, you must be busy rising. Because when they come back, they are expecting the same emotional stage they left. They are expecting you to be still standing where they dropped you, waiting to be picked up again. And that is your moment of power, not to punish, not to gloat, but to show through your transformation that you are not who they left. Because nothing disrupts their internal rewrite more than seeing that the story continued without them. This is what forces the avoidant to finally face reality. Not your anger, not your tears, but your evolution. When you are no longer accessible in the same way, their rewritten version of the past collides with the truth of the present. That collision creates a crack in their defense, and for the first time, they are forced to see the cost of what they ran from. That's when real awakening can happen. So let them rewrite if they must. Let them romanticize what they once feared. Because that is how they will justify coming back. But make sure that when they do, they meet a version of you they can't just return to. They must rise to reach. Because the only thing more powerful than being missed is being unrecognizable when they return. There's something profoundly liberating about accepting that an avoidant attachment individual will almost always circle back. Not because you need them to, not because you're waiting for them, but because you've stepped out of the emotional orbit they once pulled you into. See, when you release the expectation of permanence, you also release the invisible emotional hook they once had in you, and paradoxically, that release is what draws them back. But here's the twist: when they return, they almost never return to the same version of you they left. And that's what shakes their world to its core. Think about it. The avoidant lives in a cycle: closeness, panic, withdrawal, relief, loneliness, nostalgia, and then a quiet craving to reconnect. This cycle isn't personal, it's a defensive rhythm born from old wounds. But when they return and find that the emotional ecosystem has changed, that you've evolved, grown, and reclaimed your center, they are forced to confront something they've never had to face before: the reality that they no longer have emotional control. This realization is disarming to them because control, for the avoidant, has always been a silent safety net. Here's where most people get it wrong. They think the power lies in whether the avoidant comes back or not. But the real power lies in who you have become by the time they do. Most people are waiting frozen in place, as if their absence froze time. But time didn't freeze. It forged you. It burned away the illusions, the desperation, the self-abandonment that once kept you hooked. And now, when they return, they're not walking back into the same emotional terrain. They're walking into unfamiliar ground. They see that you're not waiting at the door. You're already down the road, building something bigger than their absence. And this shakes their identity, because avoidants build their sense of safety on the assumption that emotional availability is always guaranteed, yours especially. They push away, assuming you'll still be there. But when you are no longer standing in emotional limbo, when you've detached with love and reclaimed your power, they experience something they rarely feel: disorientation. It's like trying to return to a house they once abandoned, only to find it's been renovated, sold, and no longer has their name on the mailbox. This is where the dynamic flips. Suddenly, they're the one analyzing your every move. Suddenly, they're the one questioning, did I lose them forever? And that fear of losing you, of losing something they once thought they had unlimited access to, becomes the fuel for their return. But make no mistake, your job is not to catch them. Your job is to stay rooted in the identity you've built in their absence. Because the moment you collapse back into the old patterns to accommodate their return, the cycle resets. That's why you must understand their return is not a reward. It's a test. It's a test to see if you've truly detached from the emotional dependence that once kept you trapped in their orbit. If you have, then their return is just background noise. Interesting, but irrelevant to your mission. If you haven't, it becomes a gravitational pull back into chaos. The irony is that the only way to make peace with an avoidance return is to stop needing it. When their return becomes irrelevant to your trajectory, you win. Because now you're no longer playing their game, you're rewriting the entire framework. You're not the one who needs their love to feel whole. You've become whole on your own, and that wholeness is magnetic. It's the very thing that makes them want to return, even though they can't explain why. So when they do come back, and they usually will, let them see the version of you they were never brave enough to meet the first time. The version who doesn't chase. who doesn't beg, who doesn't collapse under the weight of silence. Let them see someone who can love them without losing themselves. That contrast between who you were and who you are now will echo louder than any words you could ever speak, because the ultimate power isn't in whether they come back. It's in knowing you don't need them to. That's what transforms the dynamic forever. That's what frees you from the cycle. Walk away so completely that if they return, they have to introduce themselves to the new you. That is the victory. That is the power. And that is how you finally win the game they never knew they were playing.